good guy for returning the cash. But there was still something wrong with his character, his inner identity. You see, and that's what wearing the mask is. When we use good deeds to hide flaws of our inner character. That's what we're talking about when we speak of wearing the mask. That's what we'll do. We'll use good deeds to hide our character flaws. There's nothing wrong with the mask. It's what's underneath the mask. That's what the issue is. That's right. You see, if I go into a bank and I'm wearing a Richard Nixon mask, there's nothing wrong with wearing a Richard Nixon mask. But when I pull out a gun and say, give me all you got, you see, that guy underneath that Richard Nixon mask, he's going to have some trouble. So the issue isn't the mask. We talk about using good deeds to mask a flawed character. There's nothing wrong with the good deeds. But what is the character flaw that we're trying to conceal? See, that's where the issue lies. You know, if you come to me, and I use me, I don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable. You come to me and you say, Isaac, man, how are things going? I tell you how things are going, and you say, well, you know what, I'm going to pray for you, and I hope the best for you. I hope the best for you. That's better. I hope the best for you. There's nothing wrong with giving me that type of encouragement. But what's wrong is what you're really thinking is, I can't stand that dude. And I hope all the bad stuff in the Bible happened to him. That's what the problem is. See, we're talking about the difference between our reputation and our character, our mask versus who we really are. You see a sister, oh, you look nice in that dress. There's nothing wrong with the compliment. But when what you're really thinking is, now you know, you ain't got no business wearing that material. See, that's what the issue. We got to deal with the enemy. See, we're talking about removing the mask. And this is a topic that is inherently introspective. That means it forces us to examine ourselves and the inner man. And so where does the mask end and where does your identity begin? We're given a couple of texts. I'm going to use these texts. First point I want to leave with is that who you are is more important than what you look like and what you do. Right. Who you are, that character, that inner identity, it is more important than what you look like and what you do. The first text given to us comes from 1 Samuel 16. And in this narrative, the prophet Samuel was given a charge by God to anoint and ordain the next king of Israel. At this point in history, Saul was the first king of Israel, but he has fallen out of the favor of God. And so God gives Samuel the instruction to go down to Jesse's house. And he has some sons. And out of his sons is going to come the next king of Israel. So Samuel goes down to the household of Jesse. They have the sacrifices. And Samuel asked Jesse to start bringing his sons before him so he can see the next king over all of Israel. And Jesse's oldest boy, Eliab, came out. And when Samuel saw him, he said, that's got to be the one. That he just looked regal. He looked presidential. You know, we tell our kids anybody going to be president, but everybody don't look presidential. We say keep it real. Eliab just looked the point. And it wasn't just that from a physical perspective, but he had the resume. He had rank in the national army of Israel. He had experience. He had the right references in his corner. He had the right family name. He had all this stuff going for him. So when Samuel saw him, he said, surely this got to be the king. That's when we get our text of 1 Samuel 16:7. God responds to Samuel. Do not look at his appearance or at his physical stature. In other words, Samuel, what you see is the match. You looking at the outer man. God says, because I have refused him. For the Lord does not see as man sees. For man looks at the outward appearance. We get caught up in this mask thing. But God looks at the heart. That's his character. God was looking at his character. And the fact that he says that I have rejected him lets me know that Eliab had made application. Because from what I understand, you cannot be rejected from something you did not apply for. And that means God considered him for the position of being the next king. Right now, Jesus could be sitting on a throne called the throne of Eliab. The largest book of the Bible, Psalms, could have been written by Eliab. You see? But God looked at his character and said, I can't use him the way that I want to use him. And then he went through all the brothers of David the same way and rejected each and every single one of them until he found David. And God said, that's the guy that I can use. What was it about David? The Bible describes David unlike anybody else. He was a man after God's own heart. In other words, David had an absolute, total, sincere integrity in his character as it pertained to his relationship with God. God said, now that's the guy I can use. And see, when God is willing to use you, it doesn't matter about your resume, it doesn't matter about your references, it doesn't matter about your career experiences. When God is on your side, He's going to put you where He wants to use you when He wants to use you.
Yes, sir.
Removing the mask. Now, we're going to do some reflection. What category do I fall into? And I is ourselves. What category do you fall into? Is it that of Eliab, or is it that of David? Is it that you look good on the outside? Everybody knows that you're involved. Everybody knows that you're teaching Bible classes. Everybody knows. Or is it that of David? What does God know about you? What category do you fall into? And I want to give you an exercise right here. And I want you to think. I want you to think right now about your character flaws. And you have some. And I have some. Because if we didn't, we'd be in heaven right now. So we all have, if you don't have any character flaws, and I want to see the nail prints in your hand. And I want to see that little hole in your side. Reflect on your character flaws. See, God knows what they are. He's just waiting for us to come into recognition of what these things are. And because you have to understand, God does not deal with our mess. God doesn't deal with us according to our mess. He deals with us according to our character. That's how He deals with us. And see, you can have everybody fooled. You got the leadership fooled. You got your bosses fooled at work. You got your parents fooled. God ain't fooled. God don't play the fool. And He has a way. And sometimes you can see some people that don't advance in life, and you wonder why. God knows. God knows I can't use him. I can't use her the way I want to because there's some things going on inside of them. And since this is, a bunch of unmarried folk, I guess I ought to make this point. It would be years before David is ready to be used the way God wants to use him. It would be years. And God was willing to wait on the right man.
Preacher.
Rather than to settle for an Eliab.
Yes, sir. Yes,
That was out.
In the meantime.
That was out.
Oh, that's a preacher there.
That's all right.
Yes, sir.
Even though Eliab had some good qualities about him, God knew he could not fulfill the role that He wanted him to fulfill. See, some will settle for an Eliab sometimes. And we know that they ain't gonna make it all the way. Learn some wisdom from God. Don't settle for a problem you don't know in exchange for a problem that you're already familiar with.
All right, preacher.
That's all right.
You can help somebody.
God was willing to wait for the right man.
Yes.
That's important. That's the right man, the right woman who is anointed by God is worth waiting on.
Yes.
David had character. Now, some people, when you bring up the character of David, first, what about David and Bathsheba? What about that? What about that, huh? I would argue that proves the point about David's character. What you mean if you don't know David Bathsheba committed adultery and he committed murder? And it was a scandal across the entire nation of Israel. But think, what if it had been Cain and Bathsheba? You wouldn't think nothing of it because Cain is like that. If it had been Samson and Bathsheba, well, that's how he got down anyway. If it had been Ahab or Ahaz, evil kings of Israel and Bathsheba, it would be no surprise because that is consistent with their character. But when folk heard with David, Jesse little boy, I know him. He sing in church every Sunday. David don't get down. David, see, that was the scandal. That was made it so scandalous because it was so outside of his character. And it shows that good people can make bad decisions.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, when you make your bad decisions, how do people take it?
All right.
Isaac did what? Girl, that ain't nothing. Let me tell you. Or is it? Isaac, no, I know him. I know him too well. No. What category
Yes.
Well,
do you fall into? Where is your character? Because that's how God deals
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes,
with
sir.
us.
yes.
How do we remove our mask? How do we remove our mask?